My dear friend Charya Hilton and I had a wonderful conversation about how food affects our professional lives. And you may say, what on earth are you talking about? You see, it is proven that what we consume in terms of social media and the sort of information what we watch and food, they all have a significant impact on our mind and body. What we eat can affect our concentration, our emotions, physical feelings, stress, and so much more. I am sure that you will enjoy this wonderful conversation that I had with my dear friend Sharaya. She's a food freedom coach and she helps women over 40 end yo-yo dieting, binges, and emotional eating and transform your relationship with food so you can shed weight naturally and permanently and get your confidence and power back. Welcome to my podcast, You Can Be Unstoppable. My name is 𝗹𝗶𝘀𝗲𝗵𝗲, and this is episode number 31, which addresses the issue of how what we eat affects our professional lives. This podcast is for curious, ambitious, and busy women, professional women who want to transform the emotional discomfort like anxiety, stress, or overthinking, or self-doubt to inner peace, well-being, and radical confidence by working with the mind. So welcome everyone, and today I've got a fabulous guest for you guys, my dear friend Sharaya. She's a food freedom coach and she's got some treats, tips and tricks for you in terms of how we can manage what we eat and how that impacts how we perform in every aspect in our lives, and especially work performance, our career. Welcome, Sharaya, and I would love you to tell me more about yourself and how is it that you got into this line of work, and how is that you're helping women with the dieting, with the weight and everything that it's involved.
Okay, so I got into this work through my own personal experience of being anorexic when I was younger, then bulimic, and then a secret eater, compulsive eater, emotional eater for like years. And it really affected everything in my life. It ruined relationships, it ruined jobs, it really ruined so many things. And I didn't know what to do. And I was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I went from when I was anorexic to being bulimic. I've got the figures here. I went from 100 pounds, which is like 40 odd kilos, 45 kilos, to 210 pounds, which is 140 kilos in 1 year. I ate my own weight twice, basically. I trebled my weight in a year. And that was all down to the fact that I wasn't dealing with the emotions of what was going on in my life. There'd been a lot of really difficult situations for when I was around 19, 20, and that's when the anorexia started. But I didn't deal with this stuff for years and years. And I ended up putting on loads of weight because I was eating so much, even though I was bulimic as well. I was eating a lot and always in secret. Nobody knew. It wasn't, I was trying to diet all the time because that seems to be the logical thing to do, but it doesn't work. And I discovered after many, many years of trying that I would just lose the weight, put it back on again, lose the weight, and it would just keep going up all the time. And that's the main problem with people who go on diets. 95% of people, diets fail. They're not designed for us to succeed, to be honest, because it's a diet industry, and the clue's in the name industry. Industry is about making profit. They're not about caring about you. So they want to make money. They want you to come back. And there is a nice little clue in someone I know worked for Weight Watchers. And in Weight Watchers kind of model, in the background of their model is they expect people to come back at least 4 times. Wow. So they make more money out of them. So they don't actually really want it to work, if you know what I mean. Yeah. They want it to work for a few people, but not for many, because actually they don't have any business if that happened. Anyway, I eventually discovered someone called 𝗍cie 𝗍𝗶, who's very famous in my field. And she was creating groups for women like me. So I plucked up the courage and went to the group, and that radically changed everything. I mean, I didn't suddenly, didn't have I'm cured, but it really got me to look at the whole thing in a very different way. And it was about the emotional side. And that's how I got into doing what I'm doing. So from then on, I began to change everything, and I ended up being a psychotherapist, a coach, hypnotherapist, and whatever, and I use all of that stuff in my work today.
So basically, from what you said, and I can see from my clients as well, it's the emotional issues that we face with, whether it's a current one or childhood or past, and they are unresolved. We refuse to deal with them, to feel all those emotions, and they build up in our body.
Yeah.
And we're struggling with food. It's the coping mechanism. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, to me, I always called it my drug of choice. It was like the way I dealt with situations, whatever the emotional, anything I couldn't deal with. And then sometimes that was even high level ecstatic stuff. I found that as difficult as what might be more low level, low energy, depression kind of stuff. I wanted to be on a kind of Prozac level. I wanted just to be able to deal with everything, numb everything through food. And it became so normal that I would just do it all the time. And I think also it's also something that the body is really clever. The mind and the body are really clever. And this system obviously worked for me at some point. So my mind went, oh, that works. We'll keep on doing that then. And it was really unconscious. Although I knew what I was doing, the driving force behind it was completely unconscious. And that was what really got to me, because I began to be really successful at everything I did, but this was the one thing I couldn't solve. And that's what so many women who come to me say, I'm really good at so many things. This is the one thing that I really can't solve, and that undermines my confidence all the time.
Would you say then that has an impact on how you show up at work, and how is that affecting your performance at work?
Absolutely. I mean, not only there's the whole what you're eating effect, we can go into that in a minute, but the confidence issue is really affected because your self-image is really damaged, because even though you can act as if you're very confident, I learned how to be confident. It wasn't a thing I felt. I actually would act as if I was confident to mask my lack of confidence. And my self-esteem was bashed every time, because it's a bit like when you smoke. Everyone who smokes knows that every time they inhale that smoke, they're not doing themselves, they're harming themselves. So you're harming yourself all the time, which you're doing, but you can't stop. So you've got the harming, and you've got the inability to stop. And also, you then feel awful about yourself. And often if you put on weight, you feel awful about that as well. So the whole thing is really, really complicated. Yeah, it does really affect the way you show up, definitely. And a lot of people cope with that either by being the jolly one in the room, or they really don't care, all of that. Or they starve themselves and then they go home and eat on their own, because they don't want to feel ashamed in front of other people. Like, I get women come to me. I've got a woman client at the moment who's actually a nurse, and she works with families where the children have got eating issues. And she said, I just feel I've no right to work with them. I feel like an imposter, because look at me. How can I possibly do that,
Then you get into this vicious circle. You cannot lose weight, and if you do, and then you put back on, the shame comes back. Like, the current client feels the shame, the imposter syndrome, like, how can I possibly help them when I myself struggle so much with this? So it certainly affects every aspect of our lives.
It does. It does. And also, I think people have a sense of, like, especially if they're if they're in a kind of managerial level, for example, where they've got to do presentations and meetings, or even stand up in front of people have said to me, they're thinking, I can't possibly be any good at this, because look, I've got no control over my life. Look at me, I'm overweight, I'm obviously out of control. So how can I be any good at this job? And even though that doesn't have to be true at all, if you're thinking that, it's also your self-esteem projects out You know,
Yeah.
the way you feel about yourself,
Yeah.
other people pick up. So in a way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, you
It
get
is,
the
yeah.
feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because what we think about ourselves is what we project to others, and how others
Yeah.
see us exactly as we see ourselves. So self-image
Yeah.
is hugely important. So what would you say is the biggest challenge for the females that are struggling with weight and with food, with the relationship with food?
The biggest challenge is for them to stop dieting, because they, even though intelligently they might have read everything and they understand nutrition and all the rest of it, because most people do these days, it's a real wrench because they cling on to it as their saving hope. You know, they try another one, then another one, and they take it that they're the problem, that they're the failure, rather
Yeah.
than, you know, they failed the diet rather than the diet's failing them. So they keep on trying the same thing, and that makes it even more defeating. You know, the more you try and fail, the worse you feel. But you try another one, because obviously, look at that person, it worked for them. And it's also very logical. And like we know, you know, emotions trump logic every time. And it's logical because we're told, you know, put it in, exercise, and it'll all go. And it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. The body does other things with it.
It's not like
Yeah.
calorie, you know, how many calories you put in, how many calories you put, because you can have a huge deficit between the two, and you still, well, struggle with your weight. If you struggle with your emotions, with everything that's going on. And I'm guilty as I think as anyone, you know, I've used ice cream to make myself feel better, which is okay, I guess, if you do once a year. It's not okay if you do it every night.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, there's a big problem for people in the whole thing about there's good food and bad food. There isn't, food is neutral. There's no morality in food, but there are certain foods that are much better for our bodies, and our bodies are designed to be healthy. You know, that's how they work. They try and maintain our health. They're really efficient systems, but we all know that we forget that we're actually an animal. And that, like, you know, if you look at animals, they eat when they're hungry, they stop when they're full, and if anything upsets them, they throw it up. You know, they've got a very natural relationship with what they put in their body, unless they're pets who are trained to do something different. But, you know, naturally, animals do what's right for them. And we would normally do that as well, but we're so far away from that. And that food has taken a whole other meaning that it doesn't actually have. You know, food can't help you deal with your emotions. That's not its job.
No, and I think we've lost that connection with ourselves, that intuition to know what's good for us, what we should be eating. Seasonal food, I think that's kind of out of the window, and with food being flown from all over the world. I remember as a child, I was eating very seasonally. Whatever the land was providing, that's what we ate. You know, there was no buy all in a shop. I didn't grow up here in the UK, so my childhood looked very different. I would presume it's probably looked more like yours than my peers in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I loved it. You know, it was very seasonal, fresh, and organic, because everything was.
And also,
organic.
you got that wonderful thing of, I remember, like, certain times of the year, certain apples would turn up. You looked forward to those things. And certain vegetables around Christmas were really special. You couldn't get them. They ran out, and then you waited a whole year for them to come back. And also, the other thing that always happened, which is a really natural process, people put on a few pounds in the winter because it kept them warmer. And they would eat different foods to keep them warm, and then it would just magically go as spring came, because they started to eat different things. The idea that that would happen now, people would freak out if that happened now. Go, oh my God, I put on 7 pounds in December. Actually, rather than, that's what human bodies are designed to do if you eat natural, healthy foods. And our bodies can process all of that stuff. It's much more difficult for us to process all the sugars and the trans fats and all that stuff that's been mega produced, all the fast food, all of that. And although it's not really, it's not a bad food, it's just not healthy for your body. Your body doesn't like it, and it has to deal with it, and that's a real strain on the body, and eventually the body just gives up on that. You know, we then end up getting all kinds of diseases and problems and issues. And I know there are some people that doesn't happen to, but like some people can smoke till they're 95, but in general your body, for most people, it will be affected. It might be your skin, it might be your internal system, it could be anything, but you're not designed to stuff yourself like that.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a few people watching, so if you guys have any questions, then put them in a comment on Facebook. Hema is watching. So hi, Hema and Nicole.